Appreciate you jumping in on the Monday after the first Eagle game of the season. A win. A hard-fought, down-to-the-wire, biting the fingernails all the way down type of win, but a win is a win is a win. And we are a winner because we've got Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation agreeing to jump in with us today. I read your article after the Eagles game yesterday on Bleeding Green. Miserable, the word you chose to describe Brian Johnson's first day as a play caller.
Wasn't that Rube? That was Rube.
Yeah,
I think that was
quoting
Brandon's.
Rube.
Oh, you're quoting Rube on that one? I'm sorry,
yeah.
BLG.
I don't disagree with him, though. I mean,
I concur. Can we all raise our hands and say, yeah, miserable would be one way to describe it? Is this going to be an ongoing issue, or we just got to cut the guy slack? It's his first day at anything. Anybody's got to go through growing pains and whatever they do. Did they get out of the miserable zone quickly enough?
I mean, you can put all the disclaimers in there that you're going up against a Bill Belichick defense. It's a rainy day. It's Brian Johnson's first game in the NFL as a play caller. All those things can be acknowledged. I think that's fair to say those things. At the same time, when you have Jalen Hurts and the starting offensive line play the entire game, and you have A.J. Brown, and you have Devontae Smith, and you have Dallas Goedert, and you only managed
did they have Dallas Goedert, PLG?
Well, apparently not. You only throw to him one time. Yeah. But when you have all those things, at least in theory, in place on the field, and you only manage one touchdown that was aided in part by a short field from a turnover, that's just not good enough. That's a massive failure.
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely a failure. From the standpoint of the expectations, because as you mentioned, we're talking about an offense with 9 Pro Bowl level players on it to be, maybe 8 because you lost Miles. Miles made the Pro Bowl, but a lot of talent is what I'm trying to say. But I do think, and an executive told me, they're probably the best game plan they're going to see all year is week 1. And maybe week 2 is the second best with Brian Flores. And AJ, I think, was the one who said, Belichick threw a lot of curveballs at him. And sometimes you got to tip your cap to the other team. And to me, to persevere, I give them more credit for persevering. There are little spots. I was telling Jody, I misdescribed it saying big plays, but I described Jalen Hurts as relentless. You got him. Then he sneaks out for a first down, or he has the little drive where he's completing AJ or Devontae, and all of a sudden you look up and you lost the game, even though the Eagles played poorly. I think there's something to that. It happened in Indianapolis last year. They were awful. And then all of a sudden, Jalen makes a couple plays. They win the game. I think that's a positive sign because they're going to be good. It's just a matter of when they get there.
Ultimately positive. I mean, they win the game. I feel like it's easy to forget that based on the reaction. And look, Jody knows this. He asked me for my score prediction yesterday. I said they were going to win 27-20, and they won 25-20.
Pretty close.
So from an expectation standpoint, it wasn't that different. Obviously, how they got there, I can't say I expected it to be exactly like that. At the end of the day, though, I think like a lot of things in life, it's how you respond. I think it's how they move forward after this and see what they can do and learn from what they saw. They were fortunate to be in a spot where every team has to work on something after week 1, and especially the Eagles after that performance. But you'd rather do that at 1-0 than 0-1.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of questions coming in about the Eagles before the game started. Changes that had to be made because guys left and they had to replace them, and the fact that they don't always let us know what's going to happen via their work in the preseason, so you just have to guesstimate going into week 1. None of us knew for sure how the backs were going to be deployed. John continued to tell me at practice, Kenny Gainwell got the majority of the work, but it was always in some specialized situation, goal line, back against the wall in their own deep in the end zone. Didn't know what they were going to do 20-20. Kenny Gainwell was it. They basically the running game, and very little use for certainly none for Rashad Penny. We'll get into that in a second. Or Boston Scott or DeAndre Swift. you see this coming, that it was going to be plug in Kenny Gainwell into the Miles Sanders role and roll from there? Or were you surprised like me, BLG?
I think the extent to the role he had, I mean, you're talking about he logged 38% of their total touches offensively, 28% of their snaps, and 81.8% of their running back touches. I mean, that's me. That's
the
that's
first drive was all
Right.
Kenny Gainwell, by the way, which was the best drive, I think, of the day. Also, I think he had 8 touches on that first drive, which ended with a Jake Elliott field goal. So, but you know, I think Kenny did a good job overall. But I do think it's funny, after all the running back by committee nonsense talk, Nick wants a lead back. Now, I don't know if it's going to end up Kenny for the whole year, but he wants a lead back. He doesn't want, oh, I got to piecemeal this, I got to piecemeal that. I think that's what we learned. Do you think that's clear?
I mean, based on how they used Gainwell, yeah, but I don't think he's that guy. I don't think he's ever been that guy, or his profile even. Like, you look at his size, he's not a workhorse kind
I
of running
agree
back.
with that.
So it feels like they're forcing it a little bit there. I think they have to adjust. I think that's one of the adjustments they're going to have to make. It's not just schematic or play calling, sequencing, or whatever. Some of it is personnel based, and I just don't think. Look, I don't think Swift is a perfect player, but I don't know.
I have to ask about Swift, since we went down this role. There seems to be, every year there seems to be a couple players, and I think DeAndre's one of them, where people hang. It's like, what? Not that, what has DeAndre Swift done that make people think he's a better player than Kenny Gainwell, if the Eagles are saying the opposite with their actions?
I mean, he does have the track record in terms of, I think he is like the 5th most receiving yards of any running back since he entered the league. There's that track record of production, being one of the league's better pass catchers, and certainly
runner.
As a runner, that's definitely fair. And I don't think he should be, we're not talking about 20 carries a game kind of guy by any means, but I mean, I don't even think he got his first one until later in the game. I think that's a little confusing, especially, I know it's only one run, but that run we saw in the preseason, in terms of a guy who can kind of make something happen beyond the blocking. And if your offense is struggling and it's going through 4 straight 3 and outs, well, maybe you want to take a look at him.
But I'd ask you, John, what has Kenny Gainwell done as a runner that you would say, oh yeah, we want to hand the ball to him 15 times a game in his career?
Well, it's not. He's a younger player. DeAndre's played 4 years and basically, was drafted to be the lead back in Detroit and never really took the job. Whereas this is Kenny's first opportunity. So I am going to lean on the coaching staff, and if they say, well, this is a better player, I got to take them at their word. Now, if they make a mistake, they make a mistake, and long term, we'll be able to see that. But I think there's a large enough sample size that when you get picked to be the guy and you never turn into the guy, like, I look at it opposite. BLG's got the half full look, which is fine. He's a great pass catcher. I think that's true. But the fact that he never sees that role, I think, tells you a lot on what was typically not a great team. So it's not like they had a lot of other things to hang their hat on, and they wanted him to be the guy, and he never turned into a guy. That's a little bit of a red flag for me, is all I'm saying.
And I see what you're saying, but again, this is his 4th year, Kenny Gainwell's 3rd year. So they've if you want to hold that one extra year against DeAndre Swift against him, you can.
No, it's more about opportunity.
Numbers.
DeAndre's had the opportunity. This is Kenny's first opportunity. The Eagles had Miles Sanders. Look, he didn't have an opportunity. He was a role player. Now they moved on, and they're saying, all right, this is our best back. Let's roll, and we'll see if they're right. I think they're right. I think he's their best back. And I think he played pretty well. I'm not and there were a lot of problems with the offense. I got to go way down the list before I get to Kenny Gainwell. I thought he played pretty well. I'm going to be interested to see the PFF ranking. Not that he was great, but I thought he played solidly. How would you describe it, BLG?
Yeah, I don't think he was terrible or anything. He had 14 carries, 54 yards, 3.9 average. Obviously, you want to be above 4 typically. But and his long was a 16, so it's not like he had nothing in terms of big play potential, but not a game breaking kind of back. And also, I think it's still too big of a role. I'm not saying you have to. He can't
No, and
play at
by the
all.
way, I've said from the jump, I think a lot of people have overrated this running back room. I think if this running back room was in a city with a bad quarterback and a bad team, it would
Sure.
be looked at as one of the worst in the NFL. So I'm coming from that standpoint. I think he's the best back they have. I'm not saying he's great back by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm not going to. Well, you're right. The running back room has to prove itself. Other than, of course, Rashad Penny, who got a chance to prove nothing yesterday. I mentioned before the year started, look for Rashad Penny to get some breaks during the season, that they might sit him on a given week because of load management, because they want to protect him because of injury. Week 1, load management. Week 1, he doesn't even get dressed. How do they run 4 backs all spring until by committee or whatever, and then I get it. They've got roster issues, and they had to elevate a punter, and they had to elevate a punt returner and the like. But if you're Rashad Penny, what's your attitude coming into the locker room today for game 2 when you're told, yeah, you're not dressing week 1?
I mean, Nick Sirianni talks about, sitting down with his players and going over their role at the beginning of the year. That's something that's really important to him. And, I'm sure they've had this conversation with Rashad Penny where it's like, hey, look, there's going to be weeks where you're not up, especially because this isn't a guy who's like playing on special teams for them. And typically your 4th running back, I think, would kind of need to do that to be active, especially if your roster's completely healthy. And it's not like you have guys inactive. And as you said, Jody, you're calling up 2 guys from the practice squad to put on the game day roster as well. So, I think there's going to be opportunities for him to be active in the future. And certainly, if the offense isn't succeeding and they want to tweak the running back rotation, which I think they should, but I think we're all going into this situation knowing the truth is he's not going to be able to stay healthy, and you can't just give him 20 carries per game. He's not going to be that kind of guy who can handle that volume. So this is where they're at with it.
Yeah. Now, one player who has a big role, I want to go to the defensive side of the ball, BLG. And I thought played pretty well, or at least solidly, right up until he wasn't playing, and that's Nakobe Dean. And I brought this up a lot. TJ Edwards, man, 20 stinking games, 95% of snaps, durability. Week 1, he's got the walking boot on his foot. I can't imagine he's playing this week. The hope of the MRI is, it's not long term. Should we be concerned? I mean, they're down to Zach Cunningham and Christian Ellis in the second half of week 1. You got to find a way to get Nick Morrow up on Thursday. And remember, you got to elevate Aaron Cepas and Britton Covey. So you got to make a move somewhere. How concerned are you at linebacker? And let's be real, the durability of Nakobe Dean moving forward.
It's a big concern. They only have 2 off-ball linebackers on the team, and Nakobe is your clear starter. He's the Mike. And look, Nakobe had that ankle injury in training camp as well. I think he missed like 5 practices in terms of the team drills. So, this isn't just a kind of a blip on the radar. It's kind of becoming an issue here when it comes to availability. So it's pretty frustrating. I think Zach Cunningham, was on the market for a reason in the middle of training camp. I think he's been okay, but not ideal. That, he might be your top linebacker now next to Christian Ellis and Nicholas Morrow, who fell out of favor over the course of training camp. I guess you don't have to necessarily promote Covey if you want to rely on someone like Olamide Zaccheaus just to field punts, and maybe that's how you get away with it in the short term. Or we'll see if Dean has to go on IR or what happens there. But certainly it was already a position of weakness with Nakobe Dean there, and now he might not be there.
And no, by the way, Olamide needs to go back and receive punts, because otherwise he's not going to touch the ball. He's another guy who Jalen couldn't find for any attempts yesterday, any targets. So don't know what his role is after week one. Just another guy that we need to figure out over time. At the linebacker position, and before N'Kobe got hurt, he was making plays against the run and coming up with tackles. He got beaten pass coverage a couple of times. Always a step behind linebacker, tight end, whoever he's covering. Oh, by the way, safeties got beat a couple times in coverage on the tight ends. That was, I think, Mac Jones's favorite target, the breadth of field down in the red zone. Kendrick Bourne was his guy. But is that going to be an issue all year? The two positions where the Eagles have massive turnover, linebacker and safety, coverage against tight ends. Guy by the name of Hawkinson coming in Thursday night's one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL. Is this something the Eagles are going to have as an issue all year long, BLG?
I thought the touchdown throw where Reed Blankenship, was trailing. I mean, that was just a really good throw. I thought.
Yeah, I thought that was decent coverage, but
yeah,
I got to look at it again.
I think decent coverage, better throw, just in a really good play, tough one there. And I think Reed is a really good player, and thought he had a good game in a lot of ways. He had a crucial tackle there at one point that set up a fourth down that the Patriots ended up converting, but to put them in that spot in the open field. But yeah, I mean, look, Justin Evans, when the Eagles signed him back when the free agency had began, they had clearly put out a message that like, hey, this isn't the only move we're making at safety. But
yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
it turns out
well, they also, I asked day 13 when he started getting first team reps. I asked Sean Desai that day, I think, and he said the next day, and he said, "Oh, it was always the plan." I'm like, "Come on, dude! After 13 days, on day 13, Brandon, we're going to look at Justin Evans."
Right?
That tells you, that was silly. But he's their best coverage safety outside Reed, and that's what they want. So tells you more about Terrell Edmonds, right, than anything else. And they don't think Sidney Brown's ready. But Sidney showed up on special teams. He made a big play.
Yep.
As a punt gunner. So maybe there's some improvement there. Josh Jobe made a big play as well on special teams. So that was a small positive. But long term, I'm not comfortable with Justin Evans at safety. Are you?
No, I think safety and linebacker are just like they're trouble spots. Now, I think the context here is that I think last year spoiled a lot of people because you're not going to have rosters that talented without holes like that often, if ever. Like every team in the NFL has some kind of position or two, and some certainly at much more important positions like quarterback or offensive line, where those issues are bigger. But salary cap, limited resources, injuries. There's never going to be a perfect roster. The Eagles are trying to piece it together there. I think that you have to hope that Sidney Brown can eventually, and I think that's the plan. I don't think the plan is play Justin Evans all year no matter what. I think the hope is that at some point Sidney Brown will continue to develop and shine. And even if it's not, him playing 100% of the snaps, at least coming in and rotating in a little bit more. As you mentioned, John, like Terrell Edmonds, I think he only had 12 snaps or something. So clearly not much of a factor, but maybe he will be more of a factor because the Eagles are going to need more bodies at linebacker, and the Eagles were obviously experimenting with him there.
Yeah, that could be big nickel time.
All right, BLG, I go to the standings, and it says the Philadelphia Eagles in first place. That's a good thing. And they're in first place in their division, tied. First place in the conference, tied. A couple other teams that we think will be in the mix to be the best in the NFC looked a little more impressive than the Eagles did yesterday. The 49ers going in and just shutting down the Pittsburgh Steelers. We debate about how much should or shouldn't do in the preseason. And Nick even saying after the game, I might have to rethink that going into preseason next year. Our offense was a little stale. Pittsburgh's offense looked great in the preseason. Their starters, 5 possessions, 5 touchdowns, except the 49ers came in with their defense yesterday, and all those touchdowns seemed to stop. And then last night, the Giants just getting a beat down put on them by the Dallas Cowboys.
I don't want to overreact, but I want to spike the football on that Giant. I'm so desperate to spike them. They stink, the Giants. The Cowboys now, on the other hand. Yeah, I think Eagles fans are sleeping on how good the Cowboys are. I
You think it was more one than the other? Cowboys better than everybody thought, or the Giants worse than everybody thought?
Well, I think the Cowboys are better than most people in Philadelphia think, for obvious reasons. I mean, they dislike the team. I think they're a good team. I think they're a legitimate contender. Now, I know all the problems with Jerry Jones better than anybody, Mike McCarthy, but they're a good team. They're a talented football team. Same thing with San Francisco. Really impressed, really with the medical staff. I was like, how do you get Brock Purdy ready for week 1? That seemed absurd to me all off season there. He's out there playing well, but Christian McCaffrey was tremendous. Yeah, they're good teams. The Giants and the Vikings were the 2 teams I said, you know what? They're not going to be good this year. And they're not going to be good this year. I'm emboldened to say that after week 1. Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dallas defense being as impressive as it's been for like the 3rd straight season now, assuming it continues pace from what we saw in week 1, because typically defense kind of fluctuates a little bit more year to year. But under Dan Quinn, they've had that consistency. Having Micah Parsons certainly helps a lot, and Trayvon Diggs, and now they add Stephon Gilmore to the mix. Yeah, I'm buying that Dallas defense for sure. Still, I don't think Dak had the best game. He didn't need to.
No, he didn't.
The defense did.
Yeah.
So kind of keeping an eye on that, especially coming off the season he is. That's kind of like a thing to watch. But certainly, again, if he gets that support. And, look, credit to you, Jody, a big Brock Purdy believer. He looked really good against a very respectable, I think, organization in the Steelers. So, yeah, I mean, those teams certainly looked a lot better. But it's week 1. A lot of weird things also happened in week 1, and it's a really long season. And, injuries, everything can change. So I think the Eagles are fortunate in a way. It sounds weird because, again, they won the game, but they're fortunate that they can kind of turn the page on this one and go into Thursday night with an opportunity to go 2-0.
Right. But as you say, Thursday night, after you have that kind of an effort, if I'm Nick Sirianni, here's what I want to do. I want to coach them up. I need these guys in my room right now, my field. We need to improve this. We need to work on that. Thursday game, not much time to get ready for it. Now, it's the same for the Vikings. So both teams are under the same time constraints, but that's one place I don't think they're lucky because there were teachable moments after yesterday's game, and the problem is you don't have time to teach them because you got to get ready for a Thursday night game. But the Vikings are just the right team to be coming in here because they didn't look good.
I think it's a great spot because you get the mini bye to do all that, and you're going to win the game. They have the worst. I'm telling you, Jalen Carter might kill Kirk Cousins this week. They have the worst interior offensive, and they never do anything about it. I mean, it's unbelievable. They roll out the same players. They can't block anybody. And then all of a sudden, I literally, after watching quarterback, I have a better affinity for Kirk Cousins, how tough he is. I feel sorry for the guy. They do nothing to help him. That is the worst interior offensive line in football. The Eagles are going to kill that team. And then they have the mini bye, and they can do what Jody says and coach it up. I think it's a great spot for the Eagles.
It's an especially long mini bye too, because they're going from that Thursday to Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
So they have even more time, which could help them. And certainly, the Bucs won in week 1. They beat the Vikings. Another potentially winnable game. And look, that's what the whole front end of this Eagles schedule is about. It's about banking wins as much as you can because things are going to get a lot tougher later on, or at least so it appears. Obviously, some of those games look tough now. Maybe they won't be as tough. You have a team like everyone thought the Packers weren't looking maybe great. They did look good week 1. The Seahawks lost to the Rams. Everyone thought the Seahawks were going to take a step forward.
That
the Rams
was, wow. I was very surprised by the domination of the LA Rams over the Seahawks. Yeah, that might have been the most disappointing team. I'm trying to think because I thought that was an easy one for the Seahawks.
How about John McMullen's choice to go to the Super Bowl from the AFC?
Oh, that was bad too. Yeah, Cincinnati. Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe Burrow didn't
Johnny Mac and BLG. Give me a second here. Let me give Johnny Mac some credit. I picked out that game as the game to highlight on my 2-hour show last night on CBS. I thought it was the most telling game of the early thing. And I said, doing my show with John McMullen, he came back raving about the Browns defense when they played their joint practice against the Eagles. And he said they just couldn't begin to stop the Browns. And the Eagles got the best offensive line in the NFL, and they couldn't stop the Browns defense. So I knew the Brown defense was going to be good. Hold Joe Burrow to 80 some odd yards. I didn't know they were going to be that good week number one.
Well, I think that had a lot to do with the calf injury and basically preseason. I think Joe Burrow is going to be fine. I have no question that Joe Burrow is going to be fine. Even with that terrible game, we talk about Jalen Hurts not having a great game. That's like times 10 to what Joe Burrow. And I have no question on either of them. Like, I'm not saying, oh, Joe Burrow can't play. He's signed 2 and I mean, that guy's good. He's going to figure it out.
I'm not questioning Burrow. I'm pointing out how good the Brown defense is.
Yeah, Myles Garrett, I mean, BLG knows they couldn't do anything with Myles Garrett. Anything. And the Eagles, as you mentioned, have good players, and they couldn't do anything with Myles Garrett.
And who's the coordinator for that Browns defense again?
Jim Schwartz. And
he might know.
And by the way, those defensive linemen, from Fletcher Cox, they love Jim Schwartz because Jim Schwartz is all about the defensive line. He makes those guys happy. So, yeah. Cleveland might be a team you got to pay more attention to.
Certainly on the defensive side of the ball. I think they could be a force to be reckoned with over there in the AFC. All right, BLG. So you got a Thursday turnaround. They're not going to get that much practice in, but we do like the matchup against Minnesota because of the way that they played. What do you think the attitude of the team coming in today is? Can they just, to use a Jalen Hurts phrase, flush it? You don't want to flush wins. You want to enjoy wins. You want to have fun with wins. But it was kind of a flushable game. How do you think they come in to work today off the 25-20 win over the Patriots?
I don't think they're under any illusion, that they played great. I think that's clearly felt. The post-game, temperature check seemed to be that way. I think that's the messaging that they have a lot to work on. And I think they, it's a big opportunity. Again, it's your home opener. It's Thursday night. It's a team that they had a lot of success against in week 2 as well last year. So I think, they enter this game with some level of confidence that okay, look, this isn't last season, but this is, there's still pieces here. We know we can be better. And I think that it's, they don't have that practice time like you mentioned, but they'll still be able to do what they can in this stretch. As Doug Peterson always talked about, the benefit of the short week maybe being not overthinking things. Maybe they kind of keep things simple a little bit and don't overthink it. But ultimately, I think it's a spot where they're being honest with themselves.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. At Brandon Gowton on Twitter. Make sure you follow Brandon Lee Gowton there, BLG. It's now X. I should mention that. So you can go to x.com or twitter.com. Editor-in-chief, Bleeding Green, BGN Radio. How many podcasts are you doing with Kempsky this week, BLG?
Probably 2. At least 2.
So you get that where you get your better podcast. Always a fun listen there. I'll end it. Jody and I, you probably heard us discussing. We discussed Derek Barnett a lot. And yeah, they had a role for Derek Barnett. And Nolan Smith didn't play much at all. Now he had the shoulder injury and missed a lot of practice time. You think it had more to do with that, but the Eagles have been pretty consistent saying Derek's going to have a role, and they gave him a role. Should we be surprised?
I don't think it's surprising. He's a rookie in part, and so was Jalen Carter. But like you were saying before I got on here, that's a rookie who could have potentially been the first overall pick. Yeah. So it's a bit of a different thing. Yeah, should have been in terms of talent. I think that's a situation where Nolan Smith's role could very well increase over the course of the season as he gets a little bit healthier and as he earns his way into playing time. It's not rookies don't just get playing time a lot of the time. They have to earn their role. Same kind of thing I said with Sidney Brown. I think these guys have chances to see increased roles as the season goes on, but that comes with, proving it. And just for example, a little bit of a different situation because he was a UDFA last year, but that was Reed Blankenship. I mean, he began the season as like the 4th safety or so behind, obviously the starters, CJ, GJ, Marcus Epps, and then Kayvon Wallace was that third guy.
Yeah.
And Reed Blankenship earlier in the year was like a healthy scratch. Eventually, Kayvon didn't look so good. Reed Blankenship did play well when he had chances, and Reed eventually, overtook that role. So it's a situation where I think things can evolve.
I got to look and see what Kayvon Wallace did yesterday. Completely. When you just said his name, I go, oh, shoot, I forgot about Kayvon. Got to see if he actually did anything yesterday.
Hey, the Cardinals hung in there. They hung in. That's a bad football team.
If that wasn't the game that the Cardinals are going to win, where are the Cardinals going to win a game? Could be a very long season for Jonathan Gannon. All right, BLG, appreciate you jumping in with us today. Outstanding job as always. We love having you on the show. We're going to tap into you plenty over the course of this season. Happy to make you the first. Let's actually talk about something that happened on the field in the game that counts. Guest for Birds 365 this year. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, BLG.
Brandon Lee Gowton here with us on Birds 360.
By the way, I just looked it up, Jody. Kayvon played a lot, played 50 snaps.
Wow.
So 70% of the team's total. And he finished with 7 tackles and 2 PBUs. Not bad. I don't know how he played, but
right. You got to break down the film, but just you can check the numbers. And I thought he was going to jump right in and play because they're not.
He played a lot. Yeah,
I didn't watch much of that game yesterday because you would have to hold and tie me down to watch that entire game before it ever got started. But the Cardinals had a chance to actually pull the upset. They did not, but they had a chance. And both Jonathan Gannon, both Gannon and Shane Steichen had leads in the second half in games where they were major underdogs. Yeah, they're 0-2. Sorry,
they're overachieving. Major underdogs. They hung in. Overachieving.
Much like saying, "Hey, the Eagles are 1-0. That's all that matters." Don't really look behind the curtain.
0-1. Yeah, that's all that matters. I'm with you.
Yeah, they're both 0-1.
Yeah, there's a lot of disappointed teams. You can't overreact. I want to spike the football, but as you pointed out, I also got Cincinnati woefully wrong. You can't overreact to week 1 games generally because a lot of crazy stuff happens. Like, I think the Giants are not a playoff level team, but I also don't think they're going to lose 40-0 ever. I don't think they're the worst team in football. That was just a snowball type of thing. And, but when you lose that at home, oof. That's against a division rival. That's a bad loss.
And sorry to rub salt in the wound to your Giant fans. I don't think we have too many Giant fans on our stream. We got some Cowboy fans, or at least some Cowboy trolls. Not so much with the Giants. Daniel Jones, $40 million per. Yikes!
That was a mistake.
That
was a mistake.
We like Dable. We like the new general manager. Like some of the moves they made. Like Thibodeau.
Yeah,
they committed to Daniel Jones, and that's something that
the toughest thing in the NFL, Jody, is to be honest with yourself. And it's a fine line because I criticized Minnesota's coming in Thursday. Like, Minnesota was more honest with themselves. Like, we were 13-4, but we really weren't 13-4. But now it's become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy because they had such a bad off season. And it's like, I'm looking at them like, I don't like that. And then on the other hand, the Giants are paying, they weren't honest with themselves with Daniel Jones. And so it works both ways. It's really difficult.
Sometimes you just get caught in between. You don't want to take the step backwards. You don't want to say, yeah, we need to restart with a new quarterback, give up assets, get to the top of the draft. No, Daniel Jones is okay. Daniel Jones is all right. We can win with Daniel Jones. He doesn't have to be great. We can do everything else right. But when you got to pay him at the same time, that's when I throw up my hand and go, all right, wait a minute. When we're talking about a guy in the cheap, when we're talking about a guy who's eating up this much of your salary cap, okay, I can go down that road with you. When you decide he's going to be a $40 million plus quarterback and he's not a $40 million plus quarterback, now you're hurting yourself. You're hurting yourself on the field. You're hurting yourself in your salary cap. Yeah, I thought that was a miscalculation by the Giants.
Yeah.
Sorry, Big Blue fans.
And I like Joe Shane, and I like Brian. And I think for the first time in a long time, the Giants are heading in the right direction overall. But I think they made a mistake at quarterback. And when you make a mistake at quarterback, that's going to hamper you all over the place.
Absolutely does. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac guys here on Bird 365. Thank BLG for hopping in. Kayla Santiago, part of the new JAKIB Sports post-game show. I'm sorry, Johnny Mac. I didn't get a chance to see any of that. I was on the air last night. So
you don't want to see me.
No, you were part of it. Haven't seen Kayla's work yet. Looking forward to getting some of it right here with us on Birds 365 coming up in about 20 minutes.